All right, everyone, welcome. Tonight is part 3 of Primordial Paradigm. And while this is largely a gut health focused webinar series, um, the topic that we're going to approach tonight is the aspect of gut health that, as far as I can tell, nobody else is talking about yet. When I first started really getting interested in the gut microbiome and healing from my own parasite and SIBO problems while I was in medical school, all of the language was around which antibiotics, which herbal therapies, how do you kill the pathogens, and then what foods do you eliminate and avoid so that you can be symptom free. And over the last several years, the connection between the brain and the gut has become more and more pronounced. I shared with you those rat studies showing how probiotic supplementation and then cutting of the vagus nerve, how that impacted a rat stress response. And since then, there's been just a rapid influx of literature suggesting all of the neurotransmitters and the different pathways. So tonight, we are going to be talking about how the brain kind of communicates to the rest of the body. And just like I like to tell the story of development from a gut microbiome perspective and all the different ways that life circumstances can alter that, we're going to be talking about what life circumstances can alter our nervous system and our response to stress. And these topics, while I am not a psychologist, okay, some of them are going to sound very psychology heavy, and they are. Just recognize that I'm a human who has gone through my own experiences, and I'm curious. I'm a very, very curious person. So while I do feel comfortable talking about them, I in no way feel comfortable answering any of your questions that might seem like you're asking me for therapy advice. So I do encourage you to seek out a counselor or qualified professional if that comes up. And I will try with my absolute best to talk about these circumstances and scenarios and traumas with the utmost respect and grace, because the reality is every single person on this planet has some version of a big T, big trauma, or little t, little t. And we'll talk a lot about developmental trauma and the kind of hidden things that are showing up in our nervous systems. So welcome, Primordial Paradigm Part 3. And the disclaimer, while I am a doctor, I am not your doctor. If you've been following along, this is the same disclaimer. So we'll just get it out of the way. This webinar is for education and information only. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have read or seen in this webinar tonight. All right, Primordial. Told you the whole name of this whole series is because everything that goes on in our bodies, none of it's brand new. In fact, even though these are more recent, newer discoveries and different ways of looking at the body, it really changes nothing. Our organism has evolved in this way since the beginning of time. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And emergence, which is one of my newest favorite subjects. And as we go along tonight, try to keep this in the back of your mind. How does this interaction of this awareness to our nervous system, how does that interplay with everything else that goes on in my day-to-day life? So this is the third hour, and what we're going to be going over tonight is the autonomic nervous system, its anatomy and functions, the development of the autonomic nervous system, and then how it crosstalks to the viscera. Viscera is the other word to describe all the organs of the abdomen, because it's not just the gut that we're talking about. It's the liver, it's your adrenals, it's your ovaries, right? It's your spleen. It's the organs above the diaphragm, it's your heart. And how all of these things yoke together, I think, is really, really beautiful. And then trauma. We'll be talking about trauma. So my discovery of all of this really found itself when I Googled vagus nerve and gut microbiome vagus nerve. And what I ended up finding was that Stephen Porges, who's this PhD, um, wrote this theory in 1994. And he was the first neuroscientist to study comparative vertebrate anatomy and the effects of the autonomic nervous system on the regulation of heart rate. And so this idea that this vagus nerve is literally connected to every single organ system in the body. And I find this connection to be in direct parallel with what Ayurvedic and Hindu describe as the chakra systems, right? So anyway, I practice some of those things, and the understanding that these ancient cultures have always kind of understood how connected everything in the body is a very beautiful thing to me. And then heart rate variability. So heart rate variability, and we'll go into that a little bit more, but Stephen Porges was one of the first researchers to kind of put it into action. And what he identified is that there's this very specific rhythm in the heart, and it's not the beats per minute per se, but it's the beat to beat variability, the time frame, the lag. And so this is actually a measurable thing. And there's new devices now. Heart Math Institute is something you should look up if you haven't heard about that. And it's a way to kind of engage your body in biofeedback practices to not only see it visually, but also just to develop that practice of, oh, what does it mean to actually be in parasympathetic tone, in healthy parasympathetic tone? And he also first exposed me to these concepts of self-regulation. And self-regulation is the ability for us as individuals to have somewhat of conscious control over choosing the state of our nervous system. And yeah, this is just the introduction. I will go into all these subjects into a little bit more detail, and we'll talk about how they all relate. So, self regulation, many, many definitions in psychology. And the way I'm using it is that it's this awareness and ability of a person to bring their nervous system back to homeostasis. Remember, homeostasis is the body's desire to kind of peak through some sort of event and then to kind of come back to this baseline state where then you're ready for another change. So polyvagal theory, and this was brand new to me. Again, in medical school, I learned that you have a fight or flight response and you have a rest and digest response. I did not know that there were all these different nuances to the vagus nerve itself. So in our parasympathetic state, which is that traditionally thought of as rest and digest, there's two anatomically different segments to the vagus nerve. The one on the back of the head is called the dorsal, and this part, it has its remnants in reptiles. And so it's the most primitive. If you think about evolution and the evolutionary tree of ancestors, coming from fish, going to reptiles, and then going into mammals, the immobilization effect of the dorsal vagus is something kind of primitive and left over from our reptilian ancestors. And so the behavior to observe is when a reptile gets spooked or scared, it plays dead. It'll even roll over, lay on its back and just be limp. And you see that in mammals when there's this video online of a lion chasing down the gazelle. And when the lion gets the gazelle in its neck, the gazelle goes perfectly limp. And you, as a viewer, you think that that gazelle is dead. It is thought that these play dead mechanisms are a way of numbing the body out from a painful experience, and that it's really protecting whatever that creature is going through, because it kind of turns off pain and it also turns off anxiety. If you have no choice but to just surrender, then the body's trying to kind of help you out. So that's immobilization, and we'll talk about that again and again and again. The ventral vagus, this is the one that's more mammal in nature. And this is why we have eyes and we have voices. And I've been practicing my calm voice for these webinars because the hearing, when we hear a calm voice, it actually relaxes us and brings us into this state of I am calm and this is a safe situation. And so the ventral vagus is mostly connected with this part of our nervous system that I care a lot about, which is, can we be calm enough, engaged enough, relaxed enough to where all of our digestive functions work optimally? Because if you remember, if our vagus nerve isn't in a strong enough parasympathetic state, then our stomach isn't going to make enough stomach acid, our stomach's not going to empty. All of those motor functions and the secretory functions of our gut aren't optimal. If our body is in a sympathetic state, a little more fight or flight, maybe a little more anxiety, we're distracted, we're reading the news, we're not really focused on maybe what's going on at hand, then our blood flow is shunted away from the GI tract and our vagus nerve just isn't primed for digestion. Our bodies are actually primed into thinking we need to move, we need to run. And so this is why eating in and around the timing of exercise can often cause symptoms of abdominal pain and bloating in some people. And even the act of eating while standing, which I am still guilty of. I am trying to be so good about this. But even just standing, again, our nervous system doesn't really take the pause and the time to think that we're in a state of digestion. Just by standing, our muscles are activated, our posture is activated differently. And so that might be enough to trigger, again, poor digestive symptoms in some people. I'm going to have to pause this for a second. My light just stopped. There we go. Now we're recording again. Okay. So I think I beat that to a dead horse. So the dorsal vagus, which is the vagus in the back, remember this is the one that's associated with like that immobilization or that freeze state. So when it's in high tone or like really strong activation, high tone is just the way to think about it being on a spectrum or even a pendulum. And so low tone is kind of that's more physiologic. That's what we want in order to be able to function and eat and digest our food, etc. But this like high tone, like over parasympathetic drive, that is that fear state. That is that shock and freeze. In that state, we get a slow metabolism and our heart rate and our blood pressure drop. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced a vasovagal response. Maybe you saw blood for the first time or somebody had a needle out, or usually medical things kind of trigger this in people. But it's like your primitive brain just assumes that if you see blood, you're probably going to die. And so you just go into the shock state. I've seen that a lot actually in clinical settings. So again, it's trying to protect you, and it's seen in everything that has a vertebra. Now, the ventral vagus, and I apologize because it looks a little busy, but this idea of yolking. So an egg yolk is enveloped by an egg white, and it's almost hard to separate them because they're gooey and sticky, and you can tell that they're part of this larger organism together. So in neuroscience, the term yolk means that exactly that, just that the yolk and the egg white, so the nerve, all these nerves are kind of connected together in this sort of like soupy kind of way. So all the cranial nerves of the face, my eyes looking at you right now, my eyebrows, right? So you can tell when I'm angry, you can tell when I'm happy. You can also tell that by the sound of my voice. So the word that Porges uses is prosodic, and prosodic is exactly the way I'm talking now. There's almost a melody to it. It's the way we coo and sing to our babies. It's the same sort of melody in like nursery rhymes and things like that. In fact, I was reflecting on this getting ready for this webinar. Even the Rockabye Baby song, I mean, we're singing about the cradle falling and, the branch breaking and the cradle falling. It's kind of a traumatic song, but we're singing it so softly and cooing that none of us ever really stop to think about the words. I just find that funny. So, eye contact, physical love, nurturing, nuzzling noses, smiling, all of these things really imprint on us this feeling of safe. And so, yeah, it's pretty neat. Our ability as a human and as a mammal to not only breastfeed and nurture and coddle, but even our ability to look at a friend and, pick them up and sit with them and smile with them, we can really help co-regulate each other. So there's self-regulation and then there's co-regulation. So over here on this right side of the diagram, so cranial nerves, these are just numbers in Roman numerals. Each one of these numbers is associated to a different function in the face. So hearing, our ability to actually hear different pitches changes based on the state of our nervous system. So when we're in a sympathetic fight or flight state, that actually can get activated sometimes just by hearing a deep, roaring, scary sound, because that's very predatorial in the terms of the natural landscape. Our facial muscles are larynx and pharynx, so my ability again to project my face, head turning, and then the heart and the lungs are yoked into this as well, because the first place we feel fear or concern is that rapidness in our heart rate. Our heart is immediately turning on, um, increasing its rate so that it can pump blood to our muscles so that we can run or jump or flee or fight. So all of this stuff is happening without any conscious control. And I just think that's so neat. So the sympathetic nervous system, again, low tone, which is how it's functioning right now in my body. I'm sitting upright. I'm kind of excited talking about some, geeky subjects that just are near and dear to my heart. This is also what gets us up in the morning. It initiates movement and it's what keeps us focused and alert. But that high tone, again, that's that rapid heart rate, that rapid breathing, blood flow goes immediately to muscles. And so, what is also probably important to recognize is that you're never all or nothing. We are this beautiful blend and meld of complexity where we can move in and out of all of these states. In fact, our body can hold parasympathetic state and a sympathetic state. And so that's why, some people are more resilient than others when it comes to gut health. They can, eat a sandwich and then go for a run. Some people otherwise can't do that. They can eat while standing and not have GI issues. But if the whole organism isn't taken into account, and if we don't have enough of that parasympathetic tone, then that's kind of my point, is that digestion just isn't going to work very well for you. So this idea of hormesis, right, which I talked about in the first webinar, just that too much of anything is bad. And that goes with everything. I think in the last webinar, somebody asked me, what about alcohol in the gut microbiome? I looked into it, and turns out if you drink excessive amounts of alcohol, whatever that might be, some of the studies were looking at vaporizing ethanol to rats. So rats weren't necessarily drinking it, but they were basically inhaling it in. Over time, it changed the gut microbiome of the rats. The rats actually had derangements in their dopamine receptors and then therefore kind of became alcoholics. It's fascinating. Oh, and I apologize. Alcoholic is no longer the word we use. We use alcohol use disorder. I like to be PC. So I'll move on because you guys probably are getting it by now. So the priorities of the autonomic nervous system really is to keep us alive, and it's to alert us to danger, and it's to recognize and find safety. I don't know about you guys, but in the midst of the whole corona thing, there have been a lot of feelings of danger at times and feelings of not feeling safe at other times. Um, your ability to sense how you're moving in and out of a stressful time is a really good thing. And that, I would just say, congratulations. And if you haven't really been paying attention, well, then I hope this webinar will kind of open your mind a little bit, because mindfulness to me really is at the root of our gut health situation, including our stress resiliency. So, neuroception, again, this is all automatic, right? We have the ability to scan our environment and within the split of a second, recognize what is danger and what is safe. And I just put this up here kind of as a joke, but like clearly grandma looks like the safe choice. And the guy on the left, um, he looks a little scary. He looks like he could maybe murder me. And then this idea of regulation. So neuroception, this ability to rapidly scan our environment, allows us to control our own physiologic state by self-regulating. So taking deep breaths, acknowledging where you are in space and time, and being really mindful in the present moment. And then also through co-regulation, which is the ability of another person to see distress in you, ask you if you're okay, talk as sweetly and kindly as I'm trying to do for you right now, and really help you find safety by being that anchor point in your environment. Yeah, it's neat. So our autonomic state is completely involuntary, and it relies on procedural memories of past experiences to build this perception of safety versus danger. Procedural memory is this idea of emergence, and everything that has ever happened to you, you as an individual, is so unique to you. All those words that your mother or father did or didn't say to you when you were a baby, childhood friendships, teachers, um, major events like moving, divorces, medical procedures, right? So all of these layers of experiences really are shaping. It's kind of like riding a bike. You stub your toe once, and then it's just the synapses keep happening faster and faster. Maybe stubbing your toe wasn't a good example. But anyway, there's a procedural memory here. And so it's so automatic, it happens without us even thinking about it. And I'm just really encouraging you to think about it. So our social engagement system is when your heart rate is parasympathetically restful. Saliva and digestion are working with ease. Your facial muscles are activated and expressive, and your voice has porosity, and you're making eye contact, and your middle ear muscles turn on so that you can better pick up human voices. And this part of our nervous system is not developed when we're born. We are not born with a fully developed social engagement system, which is fascinating, but that's also why babies require so much care and attention for the first 1, 2, 3. I mean, really, humans, we need a lot of social development in order to become an adult. You look at a cow or a horse, they're up walking within minutes of being born, and all they do is nurse, but even they have their own bonding period. Babies are incredibly fragile, and we have to really, really nurture them and help them develop patterns of safety. And with fight or flight, heart rate speeds up, your facial expressions go flat, the middle ear muscles actually turn off, which allow you to hear those deep, low frequencies, which is the frequency of predators. And then freeze. Life-threatening situations, you get stuck, and the body goes into an immobilization state. And in this state, your metabolic rate slows way, way down. To understand immobilization, we have to recognize that it is completely involuntary. And immobilization leaves us feeling helpless, powerless, and even isolated. And these are events that are strongly associated with big T's, such as, and big T is slang for big trauma, but something like rape, where you're powerless. Um, it can be incredibly, incredibly disempowering and very, very harmful to a person's nervous system as they heal and try to recover from this. To not be able to fight or flee leaves a sense of failure and unresolved because your body wanted to do it, but it was such a predatory situation that you just shut down. This move to freeze is really what a lot of trauma psychologists are just like defining as kind of like a key event that the nervous system really needs to heal and metabolize. Seth Porges is Stephen Porges' son, and he does a really awesome, almost like a TED Talk. And I encourage you to check it out. But this is a quote from him: "The more danger you are in, the more primitive your autonomic nervous system response is." And so, what does this mean for the gut? These layers of the brain, these layers of the nervous system, how does this really affect everything? Well, in webinar 4, the last and final one, we'll go into that in more detail. But basically, even though there's 90% of the vagus nerve carrying information from the gut back to the brain, which is absolutely essential, there is equally a strong influence on that motor function. That 10% volume of that vagus nerve is a very powerful one because the brain can get so aware, so hyper alert, so turned on from these past experiences, these procedural memories, whether you remember them or not. So that's another thing we can talk about is early developmental trauma, the trauma that you don't even remember. Um, that's really kind of the connection here to my personal story. Um, but this stress physiology really has a negative effect because if we're prompted to fight or flight, again, we are not going to have secretions and movement is motility. We're not going to have digestion, absorption of nutrients. And also, do you remember in part 2 when I described that these gut bacteria have this telesensing ability? So literally that little neuropod antenna will reach itself up there and it'll communicate, hey, we are on alert, like ship's going down. So if the bacteria don't think you're a safe host, they're going to try to jump ship. And again, this is one of the proposed mechanisms behind bacteremia. Bacteremia means you get blood or you get bacteria in your blood. And we see this a lot after trauma. As a surgeon, trauma is like a car wreck, a motorcycle accident. You broke a leg, you broke some ribs, maybe you need a chest tube, maybe you need emergency surgery, maybe your spleen's bleeding, maybe you got a hole in your gut, right? There's all sorts of trauma. The body just receives it as stress. And when we get epinephrine and norepinephrine going, whether it's psychological stress or physical stress or emotional stress, these are kind of the pillars here of us as humans, then it all goes kind of awry. Keep in mind, though, that the body is very resilient and the body is always trying to get you back to homeostasis. And so I think where kind of the rubber meets the road in terms of your personal gut health journey, maybe you're just here because you're interested, but maybe you're here because you're actually experiencing some of these things and you've been on a lot of different treatments and you can't really get on or off the treatment sort of cycle. Pay attention, just pay a little closer attention to what is activating you on a physical level, but also on that emotional level and also on this thought process level. And when you combine all three of those pillars, then little connections start to pop up and the truth of your ability to find your homeostasis will start to come out. So, Peter Levine is another PhD researcher that I found on my vagus deep dive, my vagus nerve deep dive. And he's the founder of somatic experiencing. If you haven't heard of somatic experiencing, give that a solid deep dive Google look as well. There'll be videos, etc. It really is a phenomenal type of movement practice that gets you really feeling your body. And what I have noticed in my own personal practices of mindfulness and feeling my body is that there are places in my body where I am absolutely numb. I don't connect to it. And it's not that I don't connect every day, but every time you get into a mode of mindfulness, new things kind of come up. It's different every time. Peter Levine is a wonderful, wonderful resource talking about trauma and how trauma affects the body and how trauma does or doesn't get metabolized from the body. And he really helps connect the dots. So, based on our autonomic nervous system physiology, the state, these procedural memories of all of our past experiences, developmental, environmental, and neuroception, right? All of these things kind of coming together. Our ability to pendulate or swing in that homeostasis thing back to safety is why different people have different experiences and reactions to the same present event. And the example that he gives a lot is two people are in a car wreck. Person in car A, maybe gets a bruise from their seatbelt or something. It's just a minor fender bender, and they're fine. They got good sleep the night before. They were raised in a home environment where there wasn't any big major T's, and the person's just really well adjusted and does fine. But person B maybe didn't get good sleep last night. Maybe person B just got out of the hospital a week ago, or their mother did, or had one of those major traumas as a kid. And so the layers and layers. Maybe they were in a car wreck when they were 5. Who knows? But the individual response to our present experience is so variable based on all of our past experience. And our experience to diet and nutrition is so variable based on all of our past experience. Sometimes I feel, now I'm getting kind of excited, I'm losing that porosity. Got to get back to my porosity. Um, Sometimes I recognize in people that have struggled with SIBO that they will get on the cycle and they start to fear and almost expect it. And again, I think our brain, and I see it with nausea too. I see it with nausea, I see it with vomiting. Our brain is emergent. It's emergent and it's procedural, and it's always trying to take kind of a shortcut to not overwhelm our body with so much sensory input. So it's like Pavlov's dog, right? That association. He pushes the bell, he feeds him, and he notices that he starts drooling just with the push of the bell. Our bodies start to expect things when we start really linking up neurosensory pathways. And so, again, I think one of the key things that I'm trying to kind of express and promote is that each person starts to maybe understand this a little bit better about themselves and thinks about life like this and really slows down and starts to pay attention. So post-traumatic stress disorder is defined by those who don't get regulated after an event. That homeostasis loop. They have a traumatic event, but they never find regulation. Either they can't get co-regulation or they can't self-regulate. And the patterns of self-regulation develop when we are babies, and they develop from co-regulation. So this, again, now I'm a mother, so everything's magnified. Um, and our ability to offer that support for our children while they're infants and as they're developing, so that they can learn what it's like to feel safe in their own bodies is, oh, it's so important. So I'll talk a little bit more about trauma. I mentioned rape, which is a very serious one, and um, and I just hold space for anybody who's listening that's ever happened to you. Adverse childhood experiences. There was a study, many studies. The first, they call it an ACE study, but the first ACE study was actually in a weight loss trial. And the author of this weight loss study was down in San Diego. I believe it was in the 80s, and I apologize, I didn't remember his name. But he noticed so many of his patients were dropping out of the study, and he took it upon himself to call them individually and to ask them what was going on. And what he discovered is that so many of these women who were overweight had childhood sexual abuse. Um, Again, as a weight loss surgeon, as somebody who cares about nutrition and metabolism, and now I'm just so intimately connected to this gut and this whole perceptive top down, bottom up experience. When we go into that immobilization state, again, our metabolism slows way down. And so our bodies are just so wise to what they need. Um, this is another concept is these like developmental traumas. So stuff that you can't really remember. Like getting a surgery before you could consciously consent or understand what was going on. If you had to be held down, maybe you needed IVs, maybe you needed a face mask. In the olden days, however long ago that was, this isn't current practice, but parents were separated from kids when they had illnesses. And so if your parents weren't there, or maybe your parents weren't even available to offer regulation, maybe you had parents that were going through their own stuff, like divorces or job troubles or postpartum depression. So there's a lot of layers here to how our early childhood experiences really set the stage for how our nervous system reacts to our environment. Physical accidents, broken limbs, major lacerations, again, seeing needles, seeing blood, all of those things are kind of frightening to the nervous system anyway. And then bullying, and then maybe even like verbal abuse by parents, and then getting this like narrative in our heads. Um, and then not bonding with a caregiver. So all of these things are kind of in the background of of who we are and why we are interacting with our environment the older we get. And again, if our brain is influencing the gut to be in a disarray of not digesting, not moving, not delivering nutrients, right? So we have to put blood flow to the gut to even deliver um, uh, cholesterol, fatty acids. Again, all the nitpicky little bits of biochemistry that then help feed and nourish our tissues. And then also give signals that your gut microbiome is okay and everything is in balance. But then also the gut has the ability to not make neurotransmitters that we need, and then cause leaky gut and cause inflammation. And all of these things can interact with mood and behavior. And like I said, I've experienced this firsthand in such an extreme way that I literally thought I was going crazy. Um, so I'm here for you. From the top down, a lot of this is kind of repetitive because I just really want to get forth these really simple concepts. But hyperarousal states dampen blood flow to our digestive system. Bacteria sense when we are in shock. They also sense when we are in fight or flight. Genetics can actually be turned on like that by the bacteria sensing these changes. And this is called methylation of host or bacterial DNA. And what some of these bacteria do is they will turn on genes that make them sick or at least cause illness in you, and they get into the bloodstream. And that's called bacteremia. And that is one of the proposed mechanisms for septic shock. Peter Levine, again, big fan of Peter Levine. He's on many podcasts, many YouTube videos. He's written many books. If you're really curious about exploring some of these trauma concepts and how they relate to you, which I think everybody needs, I highly encourage you to check him out. Peter Levine describes a stress response that kind of takes place in five stages. And again, this is that like crescendo, decrescendo, peak of a stress response, and then coming back down to homeostasis. And as you can see, if something is kind of blocked, then we get kind of stuck there, or at least our memory and our neuroception gets kind of stuck there. So we need to be in a neutral enough state to sense new in the environment. And in today's life, where we are so distracted and so connected by this lovely tool, technology, um, I appreciate this in myself. My ability to sense new in the environment is somewhat diminished because I never fully feel present. Um, then, if we are in a state where we do sense a signal that it's a threat, um, what our body really wants to do is it wants to seek help or it wants to run to get away from that threat. When the threat is over, we can know that we survived it. Whew, that was a close one, right? I'm safe. Then we can reflect and really digest the lessons that were just learned. Well, I won't do that again. I won't text and drive again. I won't, I'll look before I cross the road. Um, all my examples are about cars right now. Um, and then once that's happened, it's really been fully metabolized. It's like now we're in a clean slate and now we can respond to a new event and now we're aware of our environment. I think deer are the perfect example of this. Here in Oregon, there will be many deer just eating in your backyard, and they're just casually grazing. And as soon as you step out onto the scene, their heads pop straight up and they are big eyed and they're checking you out. And you can tell they even take a few steps to get away from you. But once you just stand there, they realize you're not a threat to them. And then they'll go back to eating, um, and ready again to take on a new threat. I find that animals are really good at this. And humans, because of our complex cognitive processes, and also this lack of memory and lack of ability to have our own nervous system control for so many years of our life, we're just a little bit screwed up. And it's so amazing to me that we live in a time and age of information where so many people are so educated and they're spending so much time learning all this neat stuff. I would only ever get to know this in the 21st century. I think it's pretty amazing time to be alive. I wanted to introduce quickly the concept of heart rate variability. So again, in the beginning, I said it's a metric. It's a way for you to actually track and see how well um, your parasympathetic state is activated. And I've become friends with a psychiatrist down in Eugene who developed an app that you connect a polar heart rate monitor to it, and he was using it to train police force officers in Toronto. And he wrote this gorgeous, gorgeous paper outlining that our body senses like strain. So strain can be just, oh, something's now harder. I can, and the example he uses is I can walk on a balance beam when the balance beam is on the ground. The threat appraisal is low. That's not threatening because the consequence is pretty low. But if that same balance beam is now 30 feet off the ground, and I did it perfectly fine before, but now I have the perception of the fall and the consequences, that stress. The stress is this like thought process, like over the consequences. And it's something that kind of sticks with us. So by using this as a tool, he was able to help coach police officers in the field how to sense a threat. Maybe somebody has a gun or something, and then to practice mindfulness and deep breathing in a moment, just postural changes, just belly breathing. Belly breathing alone can help bring us into this. It's called primary respiratory arrhythmia. It's pretty neat. Now, the psychiatrist was also a huge, huge fan of not becoming reliant on technology. Again, just because we have this technology, just because we can measure it now, doesn't mean that your body has changed. Nothing's changed. This is how humans are developed, and you can actually feel this resonance if you practice mindfulness on your own and just by deep breathing on your own. You will naturally feel more relaxed. You might feel more alert. You might feel a little sleepy. Again, it's that concept of just being in your body and being restful. And these are different heart pattern rhythms that you will see. So frustration, anxiety, worry, irritation, and the word used by the HeartMath Institute is incoherence. So nothing is like synchronous. But when you have positive emotions, appreciation, love, care, Again, oxytocin and that feeling of being safe in your body, your heart will go into this rhythm of coherence, and this is what the primary respiratory arrhythmia is. So anyway, check that out. It's a nice, powerful biofeedback tool. So if you guys are into it, I thought we could do a little mindfulness exercise. I'm currently enrolled in a 10-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course through UC San Diego that is sponsored at my hospital. It's a really, really nice thing. And I've done other types of mindfulness practices that are really beautiful about connecting you to your body. You can do it with your eyes open, you can do it with your eyes closed, but this act of really deep breathing and even doing it in community. And I think we can accomplish that here in Zoom. So, when you guys want to text in the text box that you want to do this, can I get a thumbs up? I'm sure you guys do. So, to start, what I would like everybody to do is to put your feet on the ground, your left and right foot on the ground, and to kind of sit up so that you have upright posture. And then just lay your hands in your lap. And for a while here, let's just keep our eyes open and let's just think about our feet on the ground. And when we just pause and think about our feet on the ground, they almost start to tingle. Maybe they ache. Maybe they feel hot or warm. Maybe they feel cold. But you can start to kind of name these sensations. And by naming these sensations and thinking about your feet and really putting your focus and energy on your feet, you're practicing mindfulness. You're being present in your body. And now I'd like you to think about how you're sitting in your seat. And think about, how does your bottom feel in the chair? And what sort of sensations do you have there? And so as you're thinking about your bottom in the chair, also think about your feet on the ground. So now you have your feet both on the ground and your bottom in the chair. And now we're going to layer on the breath. And if you want to close your eyes, that's fine. And so just notice how you're breathing. What part of the breath are you noticing most? Do you notice air come in the nostrils? Do you notice air moving down the back of the throat? Do you notice your chest rise? Do you notice tightness in your ribs? Can you feel your belly rise? And so, for about 30 seconds or maybe a little longer, I'm not really going to count, I want you to just observe yourself breathing. Remember, we breathe without voluntary conscious control. It will happen naturally. So just naturally breathe. Don't force it. But see if you can't feel your feet on the ground. Feel your bottom in the seat. And notice your breath. Mm. My palms are getting sweaty. Mm. I love this practice because it's so simple. You can do it with your eyes open. You can do it with your eyes closed. Um, and it's something that is always there for you. So with that, I think I think I'm done. We can now open it up for Q&A. And again, I just want to say thank you because these topics, um, it's it's so like far from the gut, but it's basically the yin to the yang when it comes to gut health. Um, so thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Did I put you guys to sleep? Yeah, it was relaxing. Yeah, yeah, it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. Um, yeah, so the UC San Diego, who sponsors the mindfulness-based stress reduction course, they have a bunch of free resources online. Oh, thank Lillian. Yeah, I enjoyed reading with you too. Um, they're Julie, yes, I moved right out of thinking mode. Yeah, when we sink into the body and the awareness to the body, it really is a good like turn off for the brain. Um, and again, what I'm learning in this mindfulness class is that we all kind of have or start with a beginner mode, and our brains are so busy. They're constantly trying to narrate something and think about something. And yeah, it's just such a powerful tool to, again, bring to your gut health practice. And again, I don't know if people are talking about the microbiome that way, but it's like we are the steward of their ecosystem. And I know I've used all this sci-fi language before, but literally, we are the god of their universe to some degree. That's kind of egotistical, so I don't fully believe what I just said there, um but we do have a big role. And so if we can keep them happy, if we can keep our bodies really in tune with, again, being able to return to a sense of safety, doesn't mean we're not going to get alerted. You bet we will. Especially if we have layers of that childhood stuff, we are absolutely going to get triggered. Activated. I prefer activated to triggered. One of my psychologist friends suggested I say that. Triggers like gun language, right? Part two, I talked all about war rhetoric. Again, this language is everywhere. It is the language we use is threatening. So, anyway, let's nurture our bodies. Yeah. Let's nurture our bodies. Let's nurture our nervous systems. And then what I've also noticed is it's like there's this other ultra, um, almost spiritual place that you can kind of come from with this, but it makes the behavior, it makes knowing what to do right for your body so much easier. And again, there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of confusion, right? Should you eat gluten? Should you eat dairy? Should you eat meat? Should you eat beans? Like all these things that people so commonly ask me. If you can get in touch with this part of yourself, some days the answer is going to be yes. Some days the answer is going to be no. And you're going to develop an ability to trust yourself and trust your body to make the right choice. When we feel disconnected, um, and anxious, distracted, I mean, the list can go on, not in control, right? Like sometimes our work or career or families, something's come up, we don't feel like we're in control. That's when we aren't in the best nervous system space to make the choice that's right for us. At least I know me personally, that's when I'm more prone to cut a corner. I don't have energy to cook for myself. I'll order takeout. I'll eat pizza. I mean, all of that's fine. I do it all. I'm just saying the ability to find yourself again and to get back to this place is what kind of it keeps you sane. It keeps your gut working. It keeps you making the right choices for your body. Okay, I am done ranting. I think my husband's going to be very excited to get the office back so he can play trivia with all of his Australian mites. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I love your comments. I'm so glad it was relaxing for you. That was my utmost goal. All right, you guys have a lovely, lovely night.